number of routers are 7. So then what is the initial TTL value? So it's a simple formula. Initial TTL value minus number of routers will give you final TTL value. So let's plug in the values. Initial TTL value minus 7 is equal to 117. That means initial TTL value is equal to approximately 124. So the initial TTL value of imt.edu is 124. And now step 3 is find out OS running on imt.edu. So how do we do that? You can actually just go to google.com and search for default TTL values of different operating systems. Default TTL values of different operating systems. So if all of you look at the screen, this is an entire table of different operating systems and the initial TTL value. So TTL value column is the second last column from the right, and the operating system column is the first column from the left. So just to give you an example, Windows based computers normally have an initial TTL value of 128. And then Linux operating systems can have a TTL value of 64 or 255. So in this case, what is the initial TTL value that we have found? imt.edu, the initial TTL value is 124. So that is closest to 128. So you can guesstimate or estimate or approximate the operating system running on imt.edu to be a Windows based system. As simple as that. So we simply use ping and traceroute to find out the initial TTL value of data packets being sent from imt.edu, and then we manage to kind of guess the operating system running on imt.edu. Let me give you another example so that this is very clear. Let us assume that, let's first write the formula. What is the formula? To find out the OS, we need to find out initial TTL value, right? And initial TTL value is basically given by the formula final TTL value minus, or rather plus, number of routers. So this is a formula that you should remember. Initial TTL value is always final TTL value plus number of routers. Now to find out the final TTL value, we use ping. And to find out the number of routers, we use traceroute. So let us now perform this on, say, ankitfadia.in or ankitfadia.com. Right? So let's do ping first. I think the firewall may block it, but let's try this. If it blocks it, we'll change it to, there you go. As you can see, it says request timed out. That means that the firewall is blocking it. This is precisely why the firewall is blocking ping, because I don't want criminals to use ping and traceroute to find out the operating system. So instead of ankitfadia.com, we can always use, say, talentedge.in. Let's see if we are able to find out their operating system. So I type ping talentedge.in, and if you notice, the final TTL value that we're getting is 59. So final TTL value is 59. Now we need to find out the number of routers. So for that, I will use traceroute. So I go back to MS-DOS, type tracert talentedge.in, press enter. So let's wait for the number of routers to show up. So if you notice, it is showing 4 or 5 routers. So you eliminate the last one. So there are 4 routers. So if you plug in the final TTL value and the number of routers into this formula, the initial TTL value becomes 59 plus 4, so it's 63. Right? So now let us go back to that table. Default TTL values of various computers. It is closest to 64, which means that talentedge.in is running a Linux based operating system. As simple as that. The exact version we cannot find out using this technique, but a simple ping and traceroute used together allows you to generally identify what kind of operating system is being run by a remote computer, whether it's a Windows based or a Linux based or something else. Later on, in maybe the next lecture, when we discuss OS fingerprinting in detail, I will actually reconfirm the guesses that we have made. So the guesses that we have made is that talentedge.in is running Linux and imt.edu is running Windows. So later on, we'll actually confirm whether these guesses are correct or not. So that's what traceroute is all about, and that's what ping is all about. Let's quickly move on to the next information gathering tool called LanSurveyor. LanSurveyor is actually a software that allows you to map your network very quickly and effectively. So LanSurveyor is generally for your internal network. So traceroute is normally for an external network where you're trying to identify whether there's a firewall or not, what kind of operating system they have and so on. But imagine that the victim is within your LAN. Then LanSurveyor is a fabulous software that creates this graphical map of your LAN so that you can analyze it and you can figure out how it looks and where there's the firewall, where's the router and so on. The name of the software is LanSurveyor. Another software is Smart. It maps your network visually and creates this visual graphical map of your entire LAN. The next information gathering technique, which will probably be the last technique of today, is domain name server or DNS. So what exactly is DNS? The full form of DNS is domain name server. The protocol DNS is domain name server, and there is something known as DNS lookup. And DNS lookup is basically a query that is sent by a user, which is normally your browser or your instant messenger chatting software or your email client. And this query is sent to a DNS server to convert a particular domain name into its respective IP address. So whenever you want to visit a website, say you want to visit facebook.com, obviously you can't remember the IP address of facebook.com and all other popular websites that you're visiting. So instead, you only need to remember the domain name of Facebook, which is facebook.com, and you type it into your browser. Your browser then sends a DNS lookup query to your ISP, and your ISP maintains a database where there are 2 columns. Column 1 is the domain names, and column 2 are the IP addresses. So when you type facebook.com, your browser will send that request, the DNS lookup request, to your ISP's DNS server, and then the DNS server of your ISP will send back the IP address of Facebook to your computer. So then your computer knows which IP address or which computer to connect to. So that is what a DNS lookup does. It allows your computer or your software or you to convert a domain name, that is facebook.com, into its respective IP address. Now obviously there's also something known as a reverse DNS lookup, which essentially does exactly the reverse. It allows you to convert an IP address into its respective domain name. A reverse DNS lookup once again is sent, a query is sent by your computer to the DNS server of your ISP or of your network, and in return it will send back the domain name of the IP address that you have mentioned. Another term that you need to know is a whois query. A whois query basically returns information about who has registered a particular domain name. So imagine that there's a particular domain name abc.com or xyz.com, and you want to find out the name of the person or the company that has registered that particular domain name or owns that domain name. So to get that information, you need to perform a whois query. And there are various websites that allow you to perform a whois query, and you can make a note of these websites, and whenever you're trying to hack into any particular server, it always makes sense to perform a DNS query to just understand better what the network is all about, who has registered the domain name, and so on. So one of my favorite websites which allows you to perform a whois query is actually this website known as smartwhois.com. So let me now give a demonstration to all of you of smartwhois.com. So I open up my browser and I connect to smartwhois.com. Let's wait for it to appear on the screen. And once you have connected to smartwhois.com, in this space provided, you can actually do a whois query on just about any domain name. So I want to find out who's registered the domain name mtvindia.com. So I type www.mtvindia.com, and within a few seconds, it has actually displayed information about who's registered that domain name. So it tells me that mtvindia.com has been registered by a company called Viacom International in New York, and the address is 1515 Broadway, New York 10036, United States. It has also displayed the phone number and the fax number of this company. So if I wish to get in touch with this company, I know which phone number or address to use. Similarly, you can also do a whois query on any Indian website if you are interested, like imt.edu. It says that it does not support imt.edu domain names, but then there are other whois query websites that would support .edu domain names. So if one doesn't work, you can always use another. Another very interesting website is dnstools.com. dnstools.com. So let me quickly open that up for all of you in my browser. dnstools.com. So basically it allows you to do a bunch of different tests on a particular domain name. Like it will do a resolve of domain, whois query, IP whois, it will check the port, it will also ping that website. So I type in the website address, click on go, and let's wait for the results. So if you notice, it has displayed the whois results, the IP whois results. So it tells me the range of IP addresses that belong to that particular domain name. Name of the person, Martin Hanningen, who kind of is the IT administrator maybe, and his phone number. And it tells me that, okay, check port 80, it is open, and it also pinged the server and showed me the results of performing that ping on that server. So that is what dnstools.com does. And finally, another similar website is network-tools.com. network-tools.com. So let me quickly give a demonstration of this particular website. So you open your browser and connect to network-tools.com, and on the left hand side you can select whichever website you wish to visit. So let me zoom in a little bit so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. So on the left hand side, you can actually select the type of information gathering you want to perform. So you can do an express, a ping, a lookup, a trace. Trace means trace route. Who is DNS records, network lookup, URL decode, URL encode, HTTP headers, email tests, and so on. And you can type any IP address or domain name here. So let me type, say, mtvindia.com once again. Click on go. Let me try to do express and see what results I get. So within a few seconds, if all of you look at the screen, it performed a trace route. First of all, it just did an IP lookup. It tells you the location. It's in the United States. mtvindia.com is hosted there. Then you have, it does a trace route for you. Then reveals the DNS records. Then it does a whois query on mtvindia.com. And so on. So I think all of you get a good idea of what's going on this particular website. I think we are running out of time, so let me quickly show you one last slide and then we'll do a recap and wrap up today's session. So whenever you are using any kind of DNS tools for information gathering and analysis, in the output you'll get DNS record type. So there'll be something called DNS record type, where either you'll get a value like A, MX, NS, CNAME, SOA, and so on. So depending on the type of DNS record that is shown in the output, the description of that server will change. Description meaning what that server is meant to do may change. So keep looking at the DNS record type whenever you're using any kind of DNS tools to do your analysis. So we are pretty much out of time for today's lecture. So network reconnaissance is a pretty large, pretty long topic. We have only scraped the surface of the iceberg. We have only covered ping and trace route, a little bit of DNS tools as well. Before that, we did some assignments on email header analysis and tracing of emails back to the criminals. I don't want to start another topic now because we have less than 2 minutes left in today's lecture. So what I'm going to do is I'll wrap up the session here. In the next class, we'll continue where we ended today's lecture, where I'll be discussing more advanced information gathering and network reconnaissance topics. Like I'll start with port scanning, then we'll go into daemon banner grabbing, and then we'll get into OS fingerprinting, and finally security auditing. We may have to take 2 more lectures to finish all of information gathering, but I'll try to finish majority portion in the next lecture itself. So I hope all of you enjoyed today's lecture. As an assignment or a homework or something to practice, I would recommend that try to find out the operating system of some websites of your choice by simply using ping and trace route, and see what kind of results you get, because that will be very good practice for whatever concepts or whatever techniques we have actually learned in today's class. And although network reconnaissance, a lot of students complain that, oh, it's not hacking. I feel network reconnaissance is actually a very important topic, because if you perform this properly, it will decide whether your hacking attempt or your attempt to break into the remote computer, the victim's computer, is going to be successful or not. So although it is little bit technical, little bit kind of networking concepts heavy, but please take it seriously, because it's actually a very, very important topic. And later on in the course, you'll realize how important this particular topic is, especially from the perspective of your exams. There are a lot of questions that I like to ask from the network reconnaissance and information gathering topic. So especially there'll definitely be a question on TTL values. So I hope you've understood that well and you practiced that well. So on that note, we come to the end of this lecture of the AFCH course. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Until the next time, this is Ankit Fadia signing off.